Mobile crematoriums.
What? Where? Here?
Over
Gosh,
there. It's a
we're
bit
talking about the Holocaust.
no, talking about
No.
Ukraine, but same thing,
Oh.
right?
Yeah.
Zelensky was in his round, which is something I want to talk about actually, his round of visits to pretty much everybody who listen, being feted in parliaments across the free world. When he went to Israel, he kind of made that reference. Basically, it's kind of like the Holocaust here, more or less what's going on, and it wasn't well received.
No.
But who cares? Yeah, it's creepy. He was during the week there. He was in Ireland, and
In Ireland, he did a Zoom chat.
yeah. Well,
No.
he wasn't in Ireland, but he was in front of the Irish Parliament, which is doing one more of his speeches he's done them in the
Yeah,
US, UK. I don't know if he's done one in France or Spain. I think he talked to the Spanish people.
Germany, France, for sure. Canada, US.
Yeah. And there's something creepy about it, about this little twerp. I know he's a hero and all that, but he's a bit of a twerp to me. Like lecturing.
He tweaks each one depending on the audience.
Yeah, and he lectures the elected officials of the people of that country and shames them if they haven't, gives them a score, Ireland, you have been okay. Not as good as you can be, but it should be better. And he goes to the next one. England, very good. Good marks.
Always has been.
7, 8 out of 10. Love you guys.
Super.
Spain,
Great weapons, thanks.
we'll work it out. Not the best, but you're doing better. And it's like, why do these people, sublimate themselves in that way?
I know, it's nuts. Did you see the one in Denmark where he goes, very good, very good. Now, what I suggest you do, and they're all like looking up, they're actually standing, they're in a standing room and it's up on a screen up high.
Yeah.
What I suggest you do is you continue to divest completely from Russian oil. After all, it would be good for the planet. And the faces in there were like, yes.
We haven't heard that before.
Cut off all Russian energy and the planet becomes greener.
Yeah.
A lighter place with unicorns and rainbows and pink fluffy bunny rabbits. Were they acting? I don't know, but they look genuinely wow.
Yeah. Well, actually, he's on song with a lot of other people. I mean, that's been a thing. It's weird. It's weird the way they've kind of dovetailed that to, or they've used the Ukraine situation to further their push towards depriving people of the world effectively of the resources to survive comfortably or even minimally. Because it's obviously, we know that's been going on for quite some time, pushing that. But I mean, they've just segued straight into Ukraine and Ukraine, the greening of the economy and the destruction or cancelling of fossil fuels is piggybacked on Ukraine. If you just throw up the Guardian game game.jpg, sorry, it's from the Guardian from a few days ago. That title, ban European flights and car use in cities to hurt Putin. Strong measures by Europe could quickly deprive Russia of oil and gas income worth billions, experts say. Who are these experts? I don't know. But experts say so. So it's like, take one for the team. And, whenever you have to, walk to your job or whenever you're freezing and all that kind of stuff, like someone said that actually. Someone, I don't know who it was, but some social media influencer suggests that when people are taking cold showers, when they are not cold showers, maybe cold showers, but shorter showers at least, to save energy, they should, when they turn off the shower after only a few minutes of showering, you should say, "Take that, Putin."
I know what you're talking about, that video. The woman with the short hair. She's not an influencer. She's the European minister,
right,
in quotes, this different title, secretary for competition, business competition and the environment or something like that.
She certainly influenced me.
She's one of the top people in the European Commission.
To think that she's completely mental.
That all began in Brussels. 2016, 2015, they began pioneering in Brussels. You could not drive in your car. The city was closed to cars. Why? Well, we'll just do it one day a week to green the planet. So this is like years, and there's multiple things folding into one,
Yeah.
All these narratives.
And it's weird. Well, yeah, it's weird how a war situation suddenly piggybacks on that, or that piggybacks on a war situation. Just dovetails perfectly with it,
Crisis is very useful for pushing agendas.
I know, but how you can actually combine the two in this certain crisis. You know what I mean? This crisis is intricately linked with that other crisis of global warming, man-made global warming, because Europe relies too much on needs to get rid of fossil fuels, and unfortunately relies a lot on Russian fossil fuels. And Russia is evil. Therefore, we have all the more reason now to get rid of fossil fuels, because not only are fossil fuels evil in themselves, but the place they come from is evil. The person that gives us to them is evil.
Yeah.
So we have two moral reasons: one to save the planet, and the other one to save humanity.
It's not just toxic oil; it's toxic
Save your
masculine
soul.
oil.
Huh?
If Putin is the embodiment of toxic masculinity, it's toxic masculine oil.
Toxic masculine oil. Yeah, so one is to save the planet, and the other one is to save your soul.
Yeah. It's got the spiritual dimension.
Yeah.
The kind of it
all
has
mixed
a
up.
religious fervor to it. It's always going to be total in its narrative telling. Like your man Schwab says, if we need a great narrative for selling the Great Reset,
Yes,
so
it's
it would
a
have
good
to
story.
be. It would have to be multi-level, philosophical in nature. Ideally, they would try and get it, on a eschatological religious.
A very
level.
good story for the children
Yeah.
to believe. We need to come up with a good story that makes them feel a lot of things. Bad things and good things. And this way we will get them to do what we want. Mwahahaha. Where is my cat? And why did I never get into a James Bond movie? It's a joke, that's, I don't know. I don't know. Skepticism, we talked about it before. Where's the skepticism, Have people lost? Did the vaccines, here's my conspiracy theory.
Oh,
today.
Jesus,
Did the
here it comes.
vaccines remove people's skepticism? Was it an anti-skepticism
Vaccine.
mRNA vaccine?
Whoa, dude, that's deep. Careful now, we're on the YouTube.
Well, maybe they
Joe.
never had it, but I don't know. No, I'm just drawing. Maybe it was always there. Maybe people weren't very skeptical anyway.
Ah,
But
it's-
I just see a lot of
it's years
lack.
long.
But I see a lack of skepticism, an extreme lack of skepticism
Yeah.
amongst average people who have the ability as human beings to be skeptical, but they've lost it. Why? I don't know. It's crazy. It's just straight up. Someone sends you a line of bullshit, a fishy story, and you swallow it hook, line, and sinker.
I have hope. I'm an optimist. I think before the end, most people will realize.
Before the end, just a minute before the end or
Yeah.
something? Like a couple of seconds before the end?
Yeah, too late, but
Yeah,
they'll
yeah.
realize it.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
I have hope.
that's
As they're freezing or hungry.
yeah. That's what it'll take, yeah.
Yeah.
But
real
then the-
suffering begets real.
But when they're freezing and hungry, they don't have a lot of time to think about how did this all happen, right?
True, but a lot of dross falls away. You really do start, and you start locally. I think you start to see locally who's an asshole and who's actually all right, and it sorts itself out from there because you can start to repair. It's like you've said it many times when you've tried to explain to people. You know what it's like on your street, and there's one guy who's just a complete dick, right? Why can't you understand that there are people in power who are also like that? Some of them, not all of them necessarily.
Not much.
Explain. You know from your own life experiences that you can extrapolate it outwards. And they will. They'll recalibrate, but very late. You're talking about virtual, but there's been a heck of a lot of diplomatic flurries maneuvering in the real world, right? That did take place in Kiev, where the European Union head honchos went to Kiev proper, right, this week.
Yeah, them and Ursula von der Leyen. Ursula
Yeah.
been lying a lot. She went there, had a good time with. Went directly to the heart of the war zone. Kiev is under threat of immediate bombardment.
Right.
So they all had to walk around the city, and also Boris Johnson there,
The day
unannounced.
after. The day after.
I think it's Ukraine status. Scotty is the Twitter handle. Ukraine status, yeah. It's the fourth one I sent you. We'll just have a watch of Boris. An impromptu visit. Didn't tell anybody. Only very few people knew. And here he goes.
Because they bloody can.
right in the heart of the war zone. The streets are very clean, a lot cleaner than Paris or London. Waving to the locals. Might kiss a baby or two.
How are you?
How are you doing? Dobry day. How's it going? Anybody want a man pad?
Oh really? Oh really? Where's the wall? Where's the the Berlin Wall? Iron Curtain.
Yep. Very dangerous place.
Any Russians here? Any Russians?
Clear the streets for Boris. There's a couple of cars there. Yep. Just having a quick look around Kiev. What's going on?
Look at the caption. Because they bloody can. Yeah, they can because they know it's perfectly safe.
People looking for cream teas, cup of tea and a cream bun. That's I think that's the Maidan memorial. All those people were shot by.
To those shot dead by mystery snipers, huh?
Я купила для друзей из Польши вот таких петушков. Они были на Бородянке на шкафчике стояли. Вот такие вот петушки остались. Да, я хотела бы их подарить.
I'm from London. Couple of cocks for a couple of cocks.
I'm from Kharkiv. Yeah, so sorry.
Actually, in Russia.
Is it for wine or for water?
No, it's for you. Yeah.
The two cockerels.
No, it's there is a second check.
Thank you very much.
Jackie.
І вам дякую.
Thank you.
Це буде
That was a
Україна.
word.
Hello,
A
Ukraine.
word for. It was a word for that term in Russia is kind of refers to gays, queers, basically. So it's like.
The cockerel.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
But that's
Boris,
it's
Boris.
Ukraine, so it's all right. It's not Russia, right?
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting. 10 days after the Russians pull back, after which about 5 days the Western media was yammering on about no, they haven't. Don't trust the Russians. They're not pulling back. They're still around Kiev. And now look.
Yeah.
So what do they believe? Their own bullshit or something else? I mean, these people are just on that point, right? He goes the day after von der Leyen. Von der Leyen goes and she is taken to the site in Bucha.
Yep.
Where
She
a
was in
terrible
Bucha.
atrocity happened. I won't play the video because I think most people have seen her shock as she's shown something.
Oh.
Oh,
Some body bags, probably. Or body bags with maybe nothing in them, you know. So staged, probably there was nothing in them.
she went and she handed him Zelensky, or Elensky. We're not allowed to use the Z anymore in Ukraine. Elensky, a portfolio with the EU flag and the Ukrainian flag on the cover, and says to him that this is a questionnaire which you must fill out in order for Ukraine to be granted EU candidate status.
Yeah, to start the process.
And she promised this process will take weeks,
Rather than months, yeah.
not years. She also confirmed it's definitely going to happen. The plan continues. Everybody, listen to what she has to say here. Quote, Russia will descend into economic, financial, and technological decay while Ukraine is marching towards the European future.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, she has to say
She
that.
knows it's not happening. Right?
Yeah.
She's not that stupid.
Mm-hmm.
In weeks' time, part of Ukraine, whatever of Ukraine, is going to be a European Union member state.
The most productive part, yeah. No, the most productive part in a few months' time, the most productive part of Ukraine will be part of Russia.
The East and South,
Yeah,
you think?
the east
That's
from
far
the
more likely.
middle over. So there won't be much of Ukraine to actually incorporate into the EU, and certainly if its numbers don't stack up, they're not going to be admitted. So that's just part of the propaganda to try and G people up and to try and create a bond, a sense, a feeling of bondship and of commonality between European peoples and European politicians and stuff and Ukraine. It's part of the
This would be, yeah.
part of the ongoing process. Yeah, same process they've been doing. Zelensky going around talking to everybody. He's one of us. Nobody ever went to Ukraine. Nobody in Europe ever went to Ukraine. Like very few, like effectively no people, relative to the amount of people who could have gone. Basically, none went to Ukraine over the past 20 years when Ukraine was just sitting there. And it was because it was seen as Eastern and Russia and...
Well, hang on, not nobody.
Well,
John McCain and Lindsay Southern Gentleman Graham went in 2014.
That was after our coup, when they had already...
Just before it.
Yeah, but in terms of the population and European populations and what they think of Ukraine and have thought of Ukraine over the past 20 years, no interest in going there, no sense of commonality or brotherhood or sisterhood or whatever between European people and Ukraine. And now they're trying to ramp that up and for obvious reasons. So it's all a joke, yeah.
If you were a betting man, actually, I wonder, people like who gamble, let's say, on the stock markets, they take bets,
Mm-hmm.
It could be a broker, it could be, I don't know how you do this exactly, but they take bets to short a currency and so on. Like, how would you bet on this statement of hers? Russia will descend into economic decay while Ukraine is marching towards the European future. Mm-hmm. If you could short that, I mean...
Yeah. If you could take a bet against that, you'd make a lot of money.
Oh, man.
In 6 months' time.
On a more serious point, I want to point out something. Boris was actually, we can laugh at him following the European Union representatives. Like, don't forget us, we're kind of part of Europe, Remember me? His bartering was much more to the point, much more pointed, promising more guns, bombs, anti-ship missiles, etc., to the tune of, I don't know how many millions this time. I don't even know if they're physically actually able to deliver on the goods. I doubt it, because Russians have made it very clear that they're prepared to shoot anything coming in. But on this, speaking in general about especially the British tactic, but it wasn't only their strategy, of course, the Americans, the Germans, the French, of flooding Ukraine with weapons. Okay, in years past, we now understand that was clearly to build up an army of resistance, in quotes, against Russia. But I mean in more recent past, like the last weeks and months, when they knew something was coming and they basically forced Russia's hand. I want to pull up this article. This is from late January, so it's a month before anything kicks off. Initials here, RUSI, that's not Russian. That's the top British military think tank. This is like, what's the name? Clapham House for International Affairs in the UK. This is their military wing.
Chatham House.
Chatham House, that's it. Title of their analysis, dated 21st of January. What do UK weapons deliveries add to Ukraine's armed forces? The bottom line is nothing. Strategically, this will accomplish nothing. Militarily. Yeah. Let's scroll down. I'll just read a part of it. Beginning with the delivery of armed vehicles. I think you need to go towards the end. Up a little. Yeah, okay, so it's in these two paragraphs you see here. No.
Back down?
Back down at the end.
Yeah. In this sense.
Here we go. Okay. I'll read it out. I've taken bits that are composite of these two paragraphs. In their conclusion, they conclude, the delivery of armored vehicles, short-range and anti-tank weapons and air defense systems can only be useful in one scenario. Their use will only be possible once all initiative has been lost and the situation is unlikely to be turning in Ukraine's favor. In short, the provision of short-range missiles, javelins, NLAWs, whatever, does nothing to improve Ukraine's odds of deterring Russia or even defending against a Russian invasion once it has begun. Conclusion, it is unlikely that Ukraine could defeat Russian forces. They knew, we'll say duh, but we know that they knew ahead of this and once it began and for the last 6 bloody weeks that there was never a hope in hell of a Ukrainian victory militarily.
No, of course not.
They dumped the weapons in there. Of course, the RUSI, this think tank, isn't going to say isn't going to speculate as to what the likely reason was. They were just doing due diligence, in fairness to them, providing objective analysis for the British government. You're putting weapons in. You're not adding value to Ukraine's military chances, either of deterring or once it started of stopping. And yet they're still flooding as many weapons as they can. Well, let's do one more analysis. This one, we just made a focus on SOT, actually. It's brilliant. This guy is in no way an alternative looper. This guy is as mainstream as they come. He's a retired Swiss intelligence officer named Jacques Baud, B-A-U-D. This was first published on some Swiss website, then the UNS Review translated from French. Okay, it's a great long article, but the overview of it is that it explores the causes and progression of the war so far. It's superb. It shows the military basis for what's going on, the legal basis for what's been happening, and of course the strategy, which is what connects us to the previous story. He concludes that if you scroll down to the end, I think I can find it. It's a long one, but it's very, very much worth reading. The EU is repeating the disaster. Scroll up a bit there. I think it's in that last. Scroll up a little more. It begins, the EU is repeating the disastrous experience. There we go. The European Union is repeating the disastrous experience of the Third Reich in the final hours of the Battle of Berlin. We, the West, are pushing citizens to go and fight. And at the same time, Facebook authorizes calls for the murder of Russian soldiers and leaders. So much for the values that inspire us. And in this last paragraph, just before the partition about the Mariupol hospital, some intelligence services, Western ones, see this irresponsible decision to flood Ukraine with weapons as a way to use the Ukrainian population as cannon fodder to fight Putin's Russia. Well, we know it's not to fight. We know that it's not to fight Putin's Russia. They don't give a shit how many bodies pile up in Bucha, in Kiev proper, in Mariupol, in Kharkov, in Kramatorsk. The more the merrier. Putin looks more evil. We can spin it that way.
Also, well, there's a big question of money. I mean, there's the old saying of war is a racket, right? It's just about, first and foremost, war is a rationale or is a reason, an end in itself, in the sense that have a war, it doesn't matter who you have it with, or it doesn't have to have a reason for it. You get to make a lot of money from having a war, especially. So the question is, who's paying for all the weapons that are being supplied to Ukraine?
European taxpayers. What's interesting is the Germans have announced that they're basically all out of stock on a whole bunch of things, and they're going to replenish their arsenal, which of course they're rebuilding their army completely, and they're going to be buying it all from the Americans.
Yeah. Although, I mean, it's not just the European taxpayer. Ultimately, they have an eye on, because that's not really making money. Sure, it's funneling taxpayer money into defense contractors, which is, yeah, it's good. That's thumbs up. But ultimately, when you supply that kind of, that level of, give that level of help and support to Ukraine, there's payback, ultimately. And it's seen down the line, and whatever is left of Ukraine will be entirely open to Western companies, and the state would be nationalized. In fact, Ukraine was doing that, trying to do that over the past, since 2014. Zelensky himself is there's video of him at some kind of some business meet or whatever, international business meet or something, where he's basically saying, listen, bring your money. Bring your money to Ukraine. But he was offering Ukrainian infrastructure. All Ukrainian infrastructure is up for sale. Right. We're privatized the whole lot of it. Everything: ports, railways,
Shell, gas,
electricity, infrastructure. Well, that's the basics, but all the rest as well. All the infrastructure of the company: ports, railways, electricity companies, gas company, whatever. Everything is up for sale, and of course that's for Western companies to come in, buy those companies, and then make profits from them. So that's there's an eye to that as well. Obviously, you don't just give all these weapons, even if it's taxpayer money that's going to defense contractors in the West that are supplying those weapons. You still want more. You want the looting of certain countries. You want it to make them kind of client states in that respect, that are more or less owned by European Western countries. So yeah, these people are entirely cynical. That's the way they've always worked. That's the way they see the world. That's the way they operate in the world. And everything that is, it's sickening to see them at the same time as having that intention, that predatory intention towards Ukraine and complete disregard for the population. It's sickening to see them and their media try to jerk the emotional, pull the emotional strings of the population to get them to feel like, oh, we're doing this for the poor Ukrainian people who are being killed by Russians, when in fact we're supplying weapons that are prolonging this war and vastly increasing the number of civilian deaths. And in fact, as we'll talk about, Ukraine itself, the Ukrainian military itself, probably under direction of Western advisors, is engaged in actually killing Ukrainian civilians in order to blame it on Russia and demonize Russia for it. So that was Bucha, as we talked about last week, and then this week there was another event in Kramatorsk, which was another missile strike. This time on at a railway station in a town in Donbass, called Kramatorsk.
It's right on the contact line, the current one, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's not occupied by Ukrainian forces. Anyway, people know the situation. About something like 39 or 40 people were killed, over 100 injured, when a Tochka U missile, an older kind of ballistic missile, was landed with a fragmentation warhead, i.e. before the missile lands, the warhead separates, and before it hits the ground, it detonates and spreads these basically little, metal shrapnel, basically, that it's designed for anti-personnel, to kill human beings, rather than to attack, artillery or anything anything armored. Just go to mission. This is from the Russian mission in Geneva. A tweet, and this is about basically just looking at you can listen to it yourself. It's looking at the serial numbers of the missile that landed.
We have just arrived in the center of Kramatorsk.
While reporting on the tragedy in Kramatorsk on April 8, the British reporter willingly gave away a crucial piece of the puzzle. Every missile has a unique marking, so once known, it's easy to pinpoint where it came from. Later that night, Italian reporters were able to get a better look at the Tochka U missile. Take a good look and remember the unique number. This is exactly the missile that killed people in Kramatorsk yesterday. There is no point denying it. This is a video shot in Alchevsk, Lugansk People's Republic, on February 2nd, 2015. You can find it on YouTube. A Ukrainian Tochka U missile was intercepted that day and later documented. Now take a good look at its unique number. Now let's compare the two. Even their serial numbers are exactly the same. It's really a good thing that many Ukrainian Tochka and Tochka U missiles fired on Donbass over the 8-year civil war have been documented. Now let's look once again and compare the two missiles. They differ in only the last 2 digits, which leads to a conclusion that they were manufactured in the same batch. Isn't it time to ask the Ukrainian Defense Ministry once again, where exactly was yesterday's missile fired from?
False flag.
Yeah. Some people have said that, written on the side of the missile was for the children or something along those lines. The white paint said was for the children. It was fired, and the people have done various, kind of looking at where it came from, where it likely came from, and it came from the east, from Ukrainian positions, came from west towards the east into to the Kramatorsk train station. Kramatorsk is in Donbass, although part of Donbass is still kind of contested. If you just throw up the Donbass JPEG, Scotty, this is from Yanukovych, 2010 election. This was the guy that was ousted when the US backed coup, 2014. This was the voting. Blue is for Yanukovych. The other one was for his opponent at the time. Now that blue area, above, pretty much in most cases above 50%, or in a lot of cases above 60 and 70%. Kramatorsk is well into that blue area, basically. So you have it's a good representation, that map, of the division of Ukraine along pro-Russian versus
Yeah.
kind of Ukrainian political beliefs or attitudes or cultural beliefs, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And notice how far it goes across, right into Odessa. So that's the division of Ukraine, and that's pro-Russian. Blue is pro-Russian Ukraine. And Kramatorsk is right in the Donbass region there, about center of the country, a little bit further in. So it was definitely it's a pro-Russian area. The Ukrainian military was not there, but was outside it on the day that the missile fell. Thousands of people had been were in the process of waiting for trains to leave to go to Russia. So we're meant to believe that Russia fired a missile that it doesn't actually have in its inventory and has in its inventory, but does not use because it was replaced by the Iskander missile by 2020. It was basically the Tochka missile was completely replaced by the Iskander missile, so Russia doesn't have it in its active inventory right now. So we're meant to believe that Russia fired one of these missiles that it doesn't actually use and doesn't have at people who are pro-Russian, who are attempting to board trains to go to Russia, to leave the area that will soon be,
in Russian hands.
Dangerous. Well,
Yeah.
soon be in Russian hands, or soon be dangerous in the sense of there'll be fighting in that area. And of course, it wasn't just people from Kramatorsk; it's people from outlying districts coming to the closest train station, Kramatorsk, to go to Russia. So it's that kind of thing where they just put it up, and you mentioned earlier on that they put up that happens. It happened 2 days ago, and it was up for 2 days at most, and then it's gone.
It was on.
There's no
trending on Twitter,
continuing
and then boom, gone.
dragging it out, whatever.
No.
Sure, it was put up there, headlines, evil Russians, Putin kills civilians, blah, blah, blah. But then it was gone because if you look at it, anybody who had to do any further reporting on it or to keep it going any longer would have to, they would find it difficult to ignore the evidence that their claim about who fired the missile is completely bogus. It was undoubtedly the Ukrainians did it specifically as they have done in the past, in Mariupol and many different places. They attack civilians who want to leave cities because they don't want them to go, and especially don't want them to go to Russia. So they try to prevent them by firing missiles at staging areas for people to leave, or at the what do you call them, the evacuation. What's the term they use? The evacuation channels, whatever.
Humanitarian corridors.
The corridors that they open up. When they can, they attack those corridors in order to scare people from going anywhere near them, because they don't want them to leave. Because a big part of the Ukrainian strategy in all of this, in this war, basically, and a big part of their thrust of their attempt to defeat the Russians, apart from militarily, which they really can't do, is to defeat them in the information war, the propaganda war, and that requires them to have as many civilian casualties as possible that they can lay at the doorstep of the Russians. People might not want to believe that, and I know a lot of people on Twitter and stuff, reject that idea out of hand, but it's extremely naive to reject it out of hand. That's exactly what's happening. That's what the information war actually is. America has played that information war. The Brits have in any military conflict they've been in for a very long time, and it's a mainstay of war and conflict is the information war. And it's a nice term, information war, but what it actually means is lying
Lying about atrocities,
Right.
often committed by your side.
Right. Spinning them, covering them up if they're committed by your side, but even better if you can blame your enemy for committing the atrocity that you carried out, then all the better. So, and they have good reason to be confident about doing that kind of thing, because they have the entire Western media in their pocket, and the Western media isn't just Western; it tends to be spread globally. It tends to be picked up.
It has such reach. Yeah.
yeah.
Here's another issue related. This week from German state media, DW, Deutsche Welle, about the so-called Russian attacks on hospitals. The headline, How Russia Could Get Away with Attacks on Ukraine Hospitals. Since invading Ukraine, Russian armed forces have hit nearly 100 medical facilities. Attacks on healthcare infrastructure are classified as war crimes, but perpetrators have historically evaded justice. DW investigates, and the picture of the hospital they have is, yes, let me make sure I pronounce this correctly, hang on. Volnovaka Hospital. Okay, so this is interesting. And they're going to give a spiel about how it was, the damage you see in the headline image there was caused by the Russians, okay? I have a video published in Ukrainian media, obviously not broadcast too widely, but nonetheless, it's a press statement given by the head of that hospital. Who was there throughout the entire process. Let's hear what he has to say about what happened at Volnovaka Hospital.
Я главный врач Волноваской центральной районной больницы Саранов Виктор Федорович. Наша больница, это центральный вход был ее. Вот, наша больница являлась опорной больницей Министерства здравоохранения Украины. Наша больница на 360 койко-мест. 24 числа, когда начался этот Армагеддон, у нас на утро было в больнице 270 пациентов. Мы пришли на работу 24 числа и 18 суток практически с работы не уходили. Оказывали медицинскую помощь днем и ночью нашим пациентам и тем, кто нуждался. Сейчас...
Вы слушали, стояли здесь?
Да, у нас были у нас военные. На мой призыв о том, что были конвенции Гаагская и Женевская, я просил, чтобы от больницы не отошли. Вот, было сказано, это война. И вот, на нашей территории стояли танки, за территорией стояли пушки и грады. Ну, вот, мы сейчас посмотрим, к чему это привело.
А это были батальоны? Что это за подразделение? Что это за...
Я не знаю.
А почему такие разрушения здесь?
Я не знаю, были военные. А кто они?
ВСУ.
Ну, военные. Это были нас батальоны или армия, я не знаю. Ну, судя по тому, что с той стороны стояла украинская была территория, и прилеты были с той стороны. Поэтому я вам сейчас покажу, я не знаю, кто стрелял по больнице. Мы в подвалах и на первом этаже принимали и оказывали помощь мирному населению.
А вот говорят, что когда их солдаты в реанимацию лежали, по ним свои же открыли огонь из танка.
Ну, они солдат эвакуировали своих, а нам заминировали вход в реанимацию, сказали, не выходить. А последний день, когда отходили уже с танка, выстрелили в реанимацию и восстановили воинские. Я вам покажу.
А там кто-то был?
Нет.
So, to be clear, when he says in that last statement, they mined the entrance to the intensive care units and there were soldiers in the ICU, that's the Ukrainian forces mined the ICU, and the soldiers inside the ICU recovering were Ukrainian soldiers. There's another additional statement that's included in the blurb of that YouTube video, not given by this man himself, but by a doctor, another doctor or nurse, I think, who worked there, because it was a female eyewitness. She says that, specifically clarifies, yes, the Ukrainians shot at their own soldiers recovering in ICU on their way out as Russian forces advanced and took the area. They could not leave any of their own so-called brothers in arms behind to live to tell the tale of what happened at that hospital. But he's given enough clues. First war crime, setting up grad positions and any other military. You cannot put your tanks on hospital grounds and use it as a firing position. You're obviously trying to draw fire, war crime. Second one, of course, is then the treatment of what took place there.
Yep.
Additionally, it's also clarified by statements from people, not from him there, but no civilian patients were killed by Russians there. They were all evacuated before actual firing took place between Ukrainian and Russian forces.
And yet Deutsche Welle, the German mainstream newspaper, just has the
Just as
banal headline.
just simply a Russian atrocity.
Yeah, yeah. It's. I mean, there's been a lot of in the whole fog of war business and in wars that have gone on over the years. It's always been difficult, and there's always been that kind of thing going on. But this one, it seems to be the information war and the disinformation and the lies and the just outright, flagrant, barefaced ascribing of atrocities or crimes or killings to Russia when it's obviously one little tiny bit of research, or even within the reporting, there's evidence that it wasn't what the media are saying. Is just passed off as whatever. We'll do it anyway. We'll say it anyway. Yeah. It's an extreme level of lying and disinformation in this particular war, and that's probably not to be, or it is to be expected, because of the internet age and mass media and cell phones and Twitter and social media, etc. So,
but it's also to do with the nature of the specific war.
Yeah,
you see, in the first few weeks, many, if not most, narrative skeptics, say people who just come out of COVID going, I'm not sure what to believe. In fact, I'm leaning towards not believing anything the officials say about the pandemic, were faced with a barrage of Ukraine, and they went, oh God, you know what? Fog of war, I don't believe any of what they're saying. All of them. Mm-hmm. Russians, Ukrainians, The Guardian, New York Times. Forget it. I hope by now some of them are starting to realize this is worth looking at. There's a fundamental difference between the two. Yes, fog of war and it's disinformation. But part of the reason it's so damn extreme is because what the two sides are doing are so different. Mm-hmm. Don't walk away from this and just throw up your hands. There really is a story here, and it speaks volumes about everything else in the world you want to understand. Ultimately, of course, being the nature of our dear leaders in the West, you know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Every day it's something different. Who knows what next week atrocity will be? The Russians have got to the point where they're like kind of predicting, or at least giving heads up to next likely one. I think the Russian MOD on Thursday said, watch out for something in, we have intelligence that something is being brewed in Irpin, another city north of Kiev.
Well, it's right beside Bucha.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Irpin's too close. Maybe he thought somewhere else. Izium?
Yeah.
I think
it
somewhere
could be
else.
anywhere, to be honest. Like, it's wherever they choose, you know. And they'll keep doing that. If they can, they'll keep doing that for as long as they feel it's useful to demonize Russia. But of course, you reach a certain point where it's like, it's done, you know what I mean? You've convinced everybody that's going to be convinced that Russia is an evil, Putin is an evil war criminal, and Russian soldiers in Ukraine are evil war criminals, they're slaughtering civilians, etc., and people just shut off. Once, okay, I've got the message, you don't need to keep telling me anymore, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So once they feel they've done their job, in that respect, they probably won't do it anymore, but there may be an opportunity to do it again, yeah, periodically.
We spoke earlier, and you thought there might be method to the pattern of when to lie about it.
Yeah, for sure. Like, well, it's the same thing they did in Syria. Like, I mean, you remember when the UN, what's the UN group for chemical weapons? UN.
The OSCE.
Oh,
no, that's the
the UN chemical weapons body, basically.
ICW.
Yeah, ICW. Yeah. In 2016, in Syria, on the day that they were meant to go there to have a look to see if there were any chemical weapons around, whatever. It had shades of Saddam Hussein and investigations into Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction. The day that they arrived there was a chlorine chemical weapon attack in a town in Syria that was later pretty much just proven as having been carried out, as they said at the time, by the Syrian government. It was a kind of false flag operation. So. Yeah, what I was saying was that those kind of things tend to happen whenever it's obviously part of the information war, and the information war for these people is a big part of any war. You know, it's like winning the hearts and minds, has a real tangible net benefit and effect on, as they say, the outcome of the war. I mean, they've been explicit about that in the media and stuff, that winning the information war is important, especially for afterwards, how things pan out after the war is over. Do you know what I mean? And that's with an eye to setting the narrative. Obviously, in this specific context, it's about setting the narrative that Russia is this. The history will show that Russia is an evil warmongering country. Putin is an evil warmonger, a mass murderer. Russian soldiers are butchers who kill civilians just for fun. That is what they're aiming to have as the history. That history will record that as having been the case, and that then will be used to dictate how Russia's standing in the world, they think, and how Russia is, how well it's accepted.
How it's
or
able
not.
to do
Yeah.
business. That's what I was wondering. Like, I kind of tongue-in-cheek titled the show, "False Flagging Its Way to Victory."
Yeah.
I mean, Ukraine isn't going to get a victory by just doing daily false flags,
No, it's after the fact.
It's bigger than Ukraine. It's mass perception that's at stake here.
Well, I mean, you can also go back to the fact that, like we talked about at the beginning of the show, European populations are being asked to prepare themselves for food shortages, energy shortages, i.e., cold showers or short showers or no showers, cooking with gas if you can get any, and cooking if you can get enough food to cook with, etc. That all of that, you're being asked to accept that on the basis of it's good for, you're doing the morally right thing, that this is fighting against the evil Russia. So in order to get people to go along with that and accept that as it progresses, rather than protest about it and demand that the government stop this insanity of planning to cut off, planning to force us to freeze and starve and ration. Instead of them protesting that and getting them to stop that, they're being encouraged to go along with it because they're being bombarded with information about how Russia is acting in an extremely evil way in Ukraine, and that they need to get behind it, and they need to, put their thoughts and feelings and energy behind stopping Russia. And in order to do that, as we showed in that article from The Guardian, you have to accept food shortages, energy shortages.
Right. So when that time comes, people will have motivation, it's hoped, as to why they're doing this. Take that, Putin. It's to invigorate.
Or even if there's not much of a take that Putin at that time, it can be spun. Hopefully, the powers that be hope, but it probably won't work out this way. But they hope that people will only grumble a little bit and won't turn on the government, because the reason we're in this situation, even though the war in Ukraine is over and it's all done, the reason we're in this situation is because Putin, and because you accepted it, because you took the moral high ground, you took the stance of stopping evil Russian aggression. It's very similar to COVID, People now have to look back. A lot of people have to look back on the things that they did that were quite inhumane towards their own family members in order or to serve a greater good, right? Which was protect your family members by treating them very inhumanely. And I'm speaking here of like people leaving their parents or their grandparents in care homes alone, and in many cases to die, because if they went near them, they would die. Anyway, it starts to get, you start to see the falseness in the narrative whenever it doesn't make sense anymore, when what you're being told to do is achieving exactly the same. What you're being told to do to prevent an outcome is actually doing is creating the
generating
outcome,
that outcome.
And that's what's happening with Russia, right? People will see in 6 months' time, they'll see that all of the appeals by their government to do this in order to put Russia back in its box and stop it from doing this ever again will have had the opposite effect. And we see that even today, that the so-called sanctions that they're imposing on Russia are having exactly the opposite effect of what they're intended to. And I'm pretty sure they know that, they know that those sanctions. I mean, Biden even said, it wasn't to deter Russia. No, sanctions were to show something. I'm not sure what they were meant to do, but they certainly
were to unite NATO.
Unite NATO, that's right. Unite NATO and unite European peoples and get them all on board, i.e. get them all on board with this narrative, because where it's taking us is a very bad place for European people, so we need to get them on board with it. So that in a certain sense, they're accomplices in their own suffering.
Right.
They become accomplices in their own suffering. They said, well, you did it.
Yeah.
I mean, COVID, looking back on COVID again, the people who watched their grandparents die from a distance, or didn't go to their family member's funeral and didn't say their last goodbyes, they're reluctant, or don't feel fully able to turn around and blame the government because they took part in it.
Right. Right.
They
twisted.
facilitated it.
That's twisted, but it makes sense.
So, I think that the sanctions are part of what the obvious. Already we can see where the sanctions are going and the effect that they're having, and it's going to be very bad for European peoples and people around them. Bad for European people, bad for Americans, but even worse initially for example, particularly African people and Middle Eastern people. And they know that. If we can figure that out and see that that's happening, and it's happening very quickly, only a couple of months after, or not even a couple of months after sanctions have been imposed, you see this effect. It's undoubted. You have to assume that they knew that this was going to happen, which means that the intent of the sanctions was not really to do anything against Russia, but to prepare the way for suffering on a large scale for European peoples. So European governments putting policies in place that they know will cause a lot of suffering for their populations. That's just deductive reasoning. There's no other way to look at it, unless these people are completely insane, and they should be in.
What do you mean, unless? They're insane either way. Look at that. That's so psychopathic.
Yeah.
It has a logic.
Well, it's
to
psychopathic,
it,
which is different from being insane.
Okay.
Insane. I mean, unless they're just completely, but they don't appear
insane
to be.
Would be that they actually really believe they would tank the ruble and the Russian economy will crash.
And they see that it's not happening, but they double down on it. That's insanity.
Yeah.
An inability to read reality and respond to it, but they can't. So, are they insane, or was this what they were intending all along? Is this okay? Is this good? It's fine. Don't worry about it. We're prepared for this. We know where this is going.
The two notorious chemical attacks in Syria, the one in 2013 was Bucha.
Bucha, yeah. That was the first one.
That was interesting because, well, it was a proven false flag after the fact, but it for the first time that the use of the phrase crossing the red line, the Obama White House drew,
red lines, yeah.
And they were weapons hot, and they're going to go in and do a NATO-style, Libya-style airdrop on Syria, but they backed off at the last minute. We suspect because the Russians had given Syria enough teeth to bear at NATO. The other one was in 2018, the Duma chemical attack, later proven to be a false flag. But even by ICW whistleblowers who were then fired, arrested. I'm not sure if anyone was charged, but anyway, that's interesting. Bucha and Duma and now Bucha. There's a kind of name. I'm not suggesting that was deliberate, but there's a name similarity between them all. Anyway, update on Mariupol.
Yeah,
it seems to drag on because the city's not that big.
No,
but what do you do in that situation? It's agreed by most sources that at the beginning, the Ukrainian forces, National Battalion, Azov, etc., numbered around 14 or 15,000. Latest Russian statement on that is they number about 3,000. Mm-hmm. The Russian MOD also this week said they've been intercepting communications from Mariupol in, quote, European languages. Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of rumors floating about who is there. At this point, as of today, Sunday, 10th of April, 5 Ukrainian choppers have been shot down in attempting to rescue at least some of those remaining Ukrainian fighters who are held up in the... Is it pronounced Azovstal, the industrial steelworks? Mm-hmm. That's nuts. That sounds like Azov.
I know, yeah.
What a coincidence. That's just chopper attempts. There was also a rescue attempt 2 days ago when a cargo ship tried to reach the port, which is part of the steelworks that's still controlled by Azov. Mm. Holy shit. The Russians said, get back, and then they opened fire. They actually hit the ship. Eventually, the crew surrendered and it was towed to Russia. Mm-hmm. But it was a dry cargo ship, mostly empty. Don't know what the size of what it was and so on. But it was definitely it was close to Mariupol port. Mm-hmm. So someone was really trying to get people out of Mariupol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, when
there's rumors that includes some top Western.
Yeah, they found French berets, at least one French beret, in Mariupol in the move to as they progress towards that steel plant and stuff. They found one, and there were at least I think there were 2 French military assets basically on one of the helicopters that were shot down as they tried to leave. So it's hard to know how many people are actually there, how many foreign kind of elements are there, and whether they're just regular kind of mercenaries who have gone there to fight, or whether there's some kind of a command structure. I doubt that they would put anybody of any significant military rank in amongst those people. You know what I mean? It's like they're smart enough to get them out before. You know what I mean? The Western powers have eyes and ears on that whole situation. They're providing intelligence all the time. They're providing they're providing intelligence on Russian troop movements, satellite data on Russian troop movements, and they're even directing Ukrainian, firing, adjusting Ukrainian firing of military to best target Russian troops. So it's a bizarre situation where the West, particularly some countries, the US, UK, France, are directly involved, but just at one remove with fighting Russia. I mean, they're directly involved in killing Russian soldiers and destroying Russian military equipment, but they're with the gun in the hand of a Ukrainian and the arm being directed by NATO, basically by the US, and point in this direction, point in that direction, fire, or even the gun that they're using was given to them by. So it's a weird hybrid war kind of situation, but it's not new, of course. Like, I mean, the US has been engaged in that for quite a long time. So Mariupol, last reports, like you were saying last week when I was talking about the difference between the civilian deaths in Iraq. There were about over 7,000 in the first 6 weeks of fighting in Iraq, or bombing by the US in Iraq, Operation Shock and Awe in 2003. And so far, the estimate from the UN's estimate was about 1,100 civilian deaths in the first 6 weeks. But that, you were saying, that didn't take into account Mariupol. And now there's been reports from Russian sources, basically, that the civilian dead in Mariupol were 5,000.
I heard that too, from the new mayor, actually, of Mariupol.
But probably the vast majority of those have to be laid at the doorstep of the Ukrainians, either directly or indirectly. Do you know what I'm saying? So there's still, even if that brings it up closer to the number of people civilians who were killed in the first 6 weeks of the Iraq War, the people who were killed in the first 6 weeks of the Iraq War were people who were directly
in airstrikes
killed by Americans. If it's a 6,000 plus number at this point of civilians in Ukraine killed, of civilians killed in Ukraine, then 60-70% of those you'd have to put at the feet of the Ukrainians, because of what we've just been describing about them using civilians, using civilian infrastructure, using hospitals, using schools, and even creating situations where they know civilians will die in order to make Russia look bad. That's how dirty this war is.
It's super dirty.
And people, war is always dirty, but people are. I see so many people on Twitter and social media who are just completely clueless about the reality of war, and yet they're commenting as if they're kind of like veterans.
What's the name of that American? I think he's a war vet, but now he's an independent journalist activist. What's the name of that guy?
Patrick Lancaster.
Patrick Lancaster. People should follow him on YouTube.
Yeah, well,
he's still up on YouTube. He's posting regular updates. He's mostly been focused. He's been in the Donbass for years,
he's
now in Mariupol and has been for on and off for a while.
Put up village.mp4. It's just a short that he put up recently. He's gonna. I don't know if he released a fuller video. But he gives an example of what we're talking about here.
Right now we're in the village of Yelenivka, and as you can see behind me, this home has been completely destroyed by fire. Now we've talked to the resident here, and she says she's lost everything to shells that came and were fired from Ukrainian-controlled territory. This is what the residents here say, and she says there's no military near here. This is just a peaceful area. And we can see she now has nothing left.
So that was,
That's good. I've also seen stuff from him where he interviews people when they come to collection points to get food and whatever other aid can be brought to them somewhere in Mariupol, somewhere in the city center, I think. And he just, asked him, how's it going? What's the story? And one I saw this week from one of his latest updates, I mean, there's no priming from him whatsoever. This isn't him saying on camera, this is what I was told. The people who live there are saying those Azov guys were just shooting at us. They weren't even engaging Russian troops. They were shooting any civilian they saw, sniping at people. As they retreated, just keep hitting civilians.
Yeah, he's in Patrick Lancaster's name on YouTube. You can follow him. He's pretty good in terms of on the ground reporting.
In terms of strategy as well in Mariupol, I saw a video this week. It's very short, just 9 seconds. It claims to have been uploaded. It probably was. It's a video taken on the day of the beginning of Russian military intervention in Ukraine. So it's February 24th. And it's someone going down Mariupol in the car, and they're filming the entrance to the steelworks. You see it. It's clearly marked Azov-style steelworks. It's got a huge entrance, a bit like an airport terminal.
Yeah, it's
and
massive.
there's 2 Iranian tanks just driving in.
Ukrainian.
Yeah. Day one, they knew where it was going.
Yeah.
Last stand here.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure we have this set up for the subsequent coming weeks.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing's sick. But we knew this before. We know the Americans have explicitly trained them, and the British and the French, in urban combat, that it was always going to come down to this.
Mm-hmm.
This article I mentioned earlier by Jacques Beau, the NATO Swiss ex-NATO spook, he lays it out as well in more detail. They were explicitly trained, the 100,000+ National Guards, now not the Ukrainian military, the National Guards that were set up, the Azov militias that were incorporated into this national battalions. They were explicitly trained in preparation to take the cities of Odessa, Kherson, Nikolaev, Mariupol, Kharkov.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how anyone in Ukraine can aware that that's the strategy that is their war strategy they're going into.
Mm-hmm.
Our last stand will be here, 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 and here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's do it. Imagine how fanatical you'd have to be to know that's what the war plan is. And this isn't. I mean, what he was saying, Scott Ritter has said, others have said it too. They're saying it because it's open source. There's no intelligence secret that was leaked. They were explicitly trained to fight in this way, in this strategy, the way it's unfolding.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And told that they'll win. They probably, a lot of them still believe that they're going to win.
Yeah.
Sad. Imran Khan, Prime Minister of Pakistan, got in trouble recently.
He's lost his no confidence vote. Last week we mentioned it because he had managed to, I think it was ruled illegal. The court initially said no, there's no basis for holding a no confidence vote in Pakistan's parliament. It was overturned on Thursday by the Supreme Court in Pakistan. So they held the vote yesterday, and Khan is out by 2 votes. Imran Khan is no longer the Prime Minister of Pakistan. Mm-hmm. Now, Pakistan, in its 75-year history, has not once had a serving Prime Minister see out his first term. They've either been shot dead or they've been voted out. Mm-hmm. Now, there are several who've come back for a stint, multiple times, including the guy they're going to shoehorn in now, actually, Sharif. I wonder if he's related to the other Sharif, who was like Prime Minister several years before Khan. Mm-hmm. Khan said from the beginning, weeks ago, this is a hit job, and he laid the blame squarely at the United States in a televised address to the nation. The people of Pakistan know it. He knew it. He said it. They did it anyway. Mm-hmm. That is dangerous.
Yeah, what he said exactly. He gave a couple of speeches. One of them, if you just put up the VLQ28 Twitter account and just open the image, the first image. He starts off in, there's a video, there's no subtitles on it yet, but this is what he said. If you just click on the image there. So he starts by saying, please understand that a cipher is the situation where our embassies abroad send our foreign office furtive messages as to what is happening in their neck of the woods. You may have heard about WikiLeaks some years back. And he says it was the US embassy sending such messages from various places which WikiLeaks intercepted. The cipher message which arrives is top secret. Why can't I disclose this message to the public, to the media, is because those documents have confidential identifying numbers on top of such documents, and I do not wish the outside world to know what Pakistan's unique code is, and thus reveal Pakistan's secrets to the world. In the next image. Wow. Therefore, I can't give this to the public, notwithstanding, in my heart, I wish the public could see it. Let me tell you what happened. So our US ambassador met a US official, and I tell you a little bit about what the US official said. Doesn't want to say his name, but first he said that Imran Khan, he said, me basically, I shouldn't have gone to Russia. Our ambassador tried to explain that was prearranged and had been planned for a while, and the US official suggested it was an arbitrary decision made by Imran Khan alone. So they're imputing, is the US imputing to Imran Khan some kind of a personal affiliation or allegiance with Russia and Putin. Then he said, I want all people to listen carefully as to what he said. This is what the US ambassador said. He said, unless you, this is what the US official said. He said, unless you say to Imran Khan, at that time, the legal petition, production, and blah, he said, saying that these. He said basically that if Imran Khan survives the no confidence vote, then Pakistan will face difficulty, i.e., consequences of such an outcome. And he says, look and listen at such an outcome, at the audacity, so that if I, Imran Khan, a sitting president, isn't removed, then Pakistan will have to suffer the consequences. Then he says that if Imran Khan loses the vote of no confidence, then Pakistan will be forgiven. So he never said he would look and consider the actions of any successor, then consider forgiving Pakistan. No, he said whomever comes into office, we will forgive Pakistan, as if he knew who the next incumbent would be, i.e. literally who has already had the PM's costume sewn to wear in office. That's the guy you just mentioned, Niall, Shehbaz Sharif. Anyway, behind all this, as has been the case in Pakistan for a very long time, is the military. The military holds sway in Pakistan, and if the military doesn't like you, then you have to leave. And they can do it they do it a bit more subtly these days rather than just have a military coup. They put pressure on to have a vote of no confidence or some other mechanism to remove you, put in a new prime minister. But the bottom line is that the military command in Pakistan is the ruler of Pakistan, has been for a long time. And that's been by design, effectively, because the US and Pakistan have a very long history, going way back to, well, I don't know how far we want to go back. Obviously, the British were before that when they actually created Pakistan out of India, out of the British Empire. But really, in the last, let's say you go back to the most relevant place you go back to would be the Soviet-Afghan War, when Pakistan was used to train as a staging ground for training of Afghani Taliban Mujahideen at the time, who became Al-Qaeda, to fight the Russians in Afghanistan. So we're talking here in the late 70s, early 80s. The US has been directly involved and kind of more or less cemented a relationship with Pakistan that was, effectively made Pakistan and the Pakistani military a kind of client in a certain sense of Russia. There's all sorts of corrupt stuff going on there as well in terms of drug smuggling. The Pakistani military has it's up to its neck, and some politicians up to their necks have been for a long time again in drug smuggling, drug production, drug smuggling in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, and also a big thing is, like I just mentioned, training of jihadi militant types to, at the time, Soviet-Afghan War was a big thing. There's also a 9/11 connection, where, as people might remember, it's public record that Pakistani general at the time, Hamid Gul, wired $100,000 to Muhammad Atta in Florida a couple of months prior, or I think a month or two prior to the 9/11 attacks. There's a whole history, a whole story behind that of Pakistani involvement in 9/11. Now, of course, we can't get into 9/11 here or anything like that, but remember those guys were training on Cessnas down in Florida. Actually, in 2012, what was his name? Began with a D. Anyway, the owner of that flight training school in Florida, in 2012, he was busted for drug smuggling. But anyway, they were using his school to train Muhammad Atta and a few other of the supposed 9/11 attackers in Cessnas. Now, what are Cessnas for? What are those light aircraft for? They're not for flying. Obviously, you don't train on those to learn then to jump into a 757 and fly it into a building. It's more for covert operations that the CIA is
Bill
quite
Clinton
familiar
knows.
with, that kind of stuff.
He was
Yeah.
governor of Arkansas.
Right, exactly. So moving drugs around the place, flying small, lighter aircraft, but also training people like the 9/11 hijackers who weren't actually the 9/11 hijackers, but like I said, we can't get into 9/11. These were people who were in the pay of Pakistani intelligence of different nationalities, some of them Saudis, some of them Pakistani, some of them from other countries, but all of them basically in the pay of Pakistani intelligence / the CIA, who were in America for training on various different things. They were just assets, and of course America has trained all sorts of people over its modern history to do all sorts of different things in different countries. The country is basically a one-stop shop for training any paramilitary and illegal type individuals, or training paramilitary individuals for illegal type activities for a very long time. So that's really what was going on there, and Pakistan was front and center in it, and that's why 100,000 was wired to Muhammad Atta, because it was like, listen, you got to pay for these guys to stay there and to undergo the training in the US for America's purposes, to ship them back to Pakistan / Afghanistan / that region for various different purposes.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's just an example of, and this is a slight scratching of the surface to show you just how bound together the Pakistani ISI, which is the intelligence services, and the military are. And when a sitting Prime Minister of Pakistan shows any disloyalty to that relationship, that long-standing relationship, then he has to go. And that's what happened to Imran Khan, because in this specific context, Khan was a realist and realized that Pakistan had a lot to gain from continuing to be friends with Russia. But that's not allowed, so out you go.
Same old Cold War, just minus the ideology.
Pretty much.
It's exactly the same. It's the same great game, you know. And it's just naked. It's almost naked. I mean, the US, when asked, "Oh no, this was entirely an internal affair." Well, no, Khan just said.
It wasn't.
You leaned on us and told us there'd be consequences, and it's scared just enough. Scared in quotes. Scared just enough compromised, corrupted people.
The thing I didn't say about all of that
is
is that long relationship with the US in terms of dirty dealings and all sorts of corrupt and illegal activities between the US, the CIA, and Pakistani intelligence and the military means that there's an awful lot of dirt that the US has on the entire military command. Just throw up the Majid Nawaz actually put it up. He is a Twitter dude. This is the army chief talking recently about Russia.
Sadly, the Russian invasion against Ukraine is very unfortunate, as thousands of people have been killed, millions made refugees, and half of Ukraine destroyed. This is a huge tragedy which must be stopped immediately. Furthermore, despite legitimate security concerns of Russia, its aggression against a smaller country cannot be condoned. Pakistan has consistently called for an immediate ceasefire and cessation of hostilities. We support immediate dialogue between all sides to find a lasting...
He's reading that off CIA letterhead, by the way.
100%. That's completely at odds with Khan's statements and
Yeah.
position, formal government position.
Right.
And it's at odds with India's. Khan twice praised India's fairly neutral position these last 2 months towards Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah.
Yeah, Khan, I mean, he's been public enemy number one since day one. As soon as he was running, The Economist in London had a headline. Something, I forget it now, something like, "Oh boy, here comes Pakistan's Trump."
Mm-hmm.
They smell a populist. They smell a national leader who will go independent, who will break out of our dirty little arrangements, you know. And Khan is one of them. Even though Khan actually, his background is very much British Pakistani.
Mm-hmm.
He was married to a British aristocrat.
Educated in Oxford.
Yeah, he's from that background, but he's very much on the human side and the less mercantile side of politics.
Absolutely. It's hard to see.
Khan
a good
recently,
guy.
he has some great stuff. It's a shame we don't, because he's obviously speaks fluent English. Not enough of what he said is heard in the West. You know, he ranted against the European Union when they were haranguing him to condone Russia. Rah, rah, rah. This general obviously, read off the CIA notes with no difficulty, but Khan said something like in response to EU envoys urging him to, join the fight against Russia. He said, "Are we your slaves?"
Yeah, exactly. He's telling too much truth there, so...
Okay, there's geopolitical context here. I'm going to cite Time magazine. Can you pull that up, Scotty? Do a search for the figure 25 billion. Okay. So, this is about US-Pakistani relations in the context of what's happening in Eurasia. Biden appeared to offer an olive branch last year when he invited Khan to join his democracy summit in December, but the Pakistan leader snubbed the request in a move welcomed by China, which has funded projects in the nation valued at more than $25 billion. Khan has since boosted ties with Russia, holding the first top-level meeting in more than 2 decades. I didn't know that. The first top-level meeting between the leader of Pakistan and Russia. That was Khan's notorious one where he visited Putin on the day of the Russian...
That was a red flag, yeah.
Big red flag. First top-level meeting between the two leaders of Russia and Pakistan, just hours after the Russian leader invaded Ukraine. Shehbaz Sharif, who leads the main opposition party and is poised to take power if Khan is ousted, that has since happened, has vowed to improve ties with the US and European Union if he wins. And then blah, blah. He said that the army has been staying neutral. Yeah, they haven't. But I think, mm-hmm. It's kind of one to watch. I don't foresee like a situation like Ukraine happening there. But I think I tend to agree with Andrew Karibko, the Russian-American analyst. He writes a lot on what's going on in Pakistan and its major trade and investment deals with China. This is the site, Pakistan is the site of the Chinese-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is already being built. We're talking major gas, rail, shipping links that would connect China over land to the Indian Ocean. We've got a major port that's being built there. Can you pull up this latest? It's not the latest. It's actually, I think it's from 2 weeks ago. This predates Khan's ouster. It's analysis from Karibko. Scroll down to regime change campaign. Okay, sorry, it's at the top here. The success of the United States regime change campaign in Pakistan could turn that country from the zipper of Eurasia in the sense that it would open up Eurasia for Russian and Chinese integration into the fault line of Eurasia by tearing apart the same game-changing multipolar processes that it's participating in. Mm-hmm. He later concludes Pakistan could be exploited by the declining unipolar hegemon, namely the US, to deal a heavy blow to multipolar connectivity processes in the geostrategically located Eurasian heartland. So it's not quite synonymous, but Pakistan is a kind of a Ukraine of Eurasia. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just on purely geographical terms. Mm-hmm. We'll see. They probably think, meh, it's just business. We've sewn it up. New prime minister, no fuss. But there were some huge rallies Khan held in the weeks running up to this. People know what's going on there. They know this is a coup. And they know where the source of it is. Mm-hmm. So, in any event, it's all wishful thinking on the empire's part because those deals, they're not going to be ripped up. They're already being built, those economic corridors.
Right.
Ports, highways are half built.
Yeah, but the whole...
New cities.
Yeah. America's doing its best to thwart it. I mean, that, and it goes back, like we've talked about in previous shows, goes back to 20 years, goes back to the invasion of Afghanistan, the invasion of Iraq, and they had an eye on Russia way back then. Just throw up that map there, just so as a scroll down a little bit. Yeah, it's not. Can you zoom in? Yeah. It's not a very good map, actually, but anyway. You see Afghanistan there, Pakistan right beside it. I mean, if China wants westward expansion, railways, transport, roads, all that kind of stuff to develop countries to the west of it, then those countries need to be people who want to stop that from happening. Chinese one belt, one road, kind of Eurasian integration westwards. People who want to stop that from happening need to make sure that they hold on to primarily Pakistan and Afghanistan. Afghanistan primarily, and that's why they were in Afghanistan for so long, and why you have to make sure Iran is kept down, and why you have to keep Russia back within its borders type thing. And I don't mean stop Russia expanding. I mean stop Russia. I don't mean stop Russia expanding militarily, but politically and economically. And that's what a lot of all of this is about and has been about for a very long time. While you're being sold some emotionally charged narrative about, Putin killed my baby or some other bullshit, that's the real politic going on behind it. And, you can continue to watch the sideshow of Putin killed my baby and I'm doing it for the fields as long as you want, or you can continue to, believe that China is killing Uyghurs or whatever if you want, but you're missing what's actually happening behind the scenes if you continue to go with that bullshit narrative, and you won't understand the world around you or the world you live in, and you won't understand why things are happening the way they're happening. So yeah, and talking about bullshit narratives, check out that last Twitter link, Scotty. The one you haven't used yet. This is the it's Coimbra. Yeah, this is the the leader of the opposition. He's the leader of the Labour Party in Australia. Could be Prime Minister of Australia in the next election, which is coming up, I think, this year. But just have a listen there.
Serious challenges to solve, and we need serious people to solve them. We have serious problems to solve, and we need serious people to solve them. Unfortunately, Tony Abbott is not the least bit interested in fixing any. Bob Robson is not the least bit interested in solving it. He's only interested in two things. He is interested in two things: making Australians afraid of it, making you afraid of it, and telling them who's to blame for it. And telling you who's to blame for it.
Jesus.
Well, you could put, people could jump to all sorts of like, oh my God, kind of like mind blown responses, but to that. But the obvious answer to why there's that consistency between a TV show and the statements of the leader of the Labour Party in Australia is that his speechwriters watch those kind of White House type drama shows and stuff, and that's where they get their information from speeches from. It's just, I mean, there's a blending of the two, like reality, TV and reality is blended, and you don't know which is which, and they get
who's really an actor and who's really president.
Well, yeah, I mean
Zelensky.
Well, yeah, political speechwriters and screenwriters.
Yeah, in Zelensky's case, he's obviously famous for being an actor playing the role of becoming president.
Right,
but people don't know that the entire team that produced his TV show, Servant of the People, was just lifted and put in the cabinet.
Right.
They were actually the scriptwriters, and now they're actually in government. It's one and the same entity,
Yeah. NATO has decided that they are going to. I mean, they have 40,000 troops on their eastern border. Supposedly, NATO, whatever NATO is, this week actually, the Polish Prime Minister accused Macron, because Macron talks to Putin. He likened that to appeasement of Hitler. But no, did he liken it to appeasement of Hitler? I'm not sure exactly what he, but the implication, I think
he did.
Was it the appeasement of Hitler? Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So he accused Macron of appeasing Hitler, basically, right?
Yeah.
And Macron responded to him by saying,
That
in a newspaper article, calling him an extremist anti-Semite.
Yeah.
Now, that's an example of NATO unity right there.
Right.
Or the reality of NATO unity behind the scenes,
Yeah.
behind the blurb and behind the propaganda. But they have 40,000 troops. Supposedly, that douchebag Stoltenberg, the pencil neck Stoltenberg, the CEO of NATO, the chief of NATO, he has said that they're going to add more. He didn't say how many, but enough to stop on the eastern border. They're going to add more troops and more equipment in order to be sufficient to prevent a Russian invasion. That they could
Of NATO.
Of NATO, wherever NATO is.
NATO
There should be a map of Europe, and the NATO countries should all just be called NATO. You should
why
blur
not?
the
What's with
borders
the
and just
border?
say NATO, because you keep talking about NATO as if it's one country or something, and NATO is going to do this and NATO is going to do that. When NATO is going to do nothing, it's individual countries still. I mean, they want to create the idea of this, we're all in this together. But he said, so they're going to put a lot more troops eastwards. Whether they do or not, don't know, but they have 40,000 there. And I think he said specifically the Baltics, so Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, the countries that directly have, well, Lithuania doesn't have a border with, it has a border with Belarus, but not with Russia. But Estonia and Latvia have a border with Russia. But I suppose Lithuania having a border with Belarus is just as bad as having a border with Russia. Anyway.
I think Lithuania has a border with Kaliningrad.
Correct, yeah. So it's those three countries that they're concerned about that they think might be invaded by Russia. Obviously, that's very unlikely to happen, but they're going to do that anyway.
I think they'll be Russian before we see out this world.
Maybe.
In our lifetimes.
Maybe.
Simply because there's such a huge number of ethnic Russians there. And the way the West is self-destructing, NATO stand, they'll be begging to be part of the Russian Federation again.
Yeah.
But that's purely speculation. But yeah, an invasion, like, no. But if they do something stupid like start to house serious American and British military equipment on their territory, they could easily provoke Russia into doing.
That's where I think initially I thought that, I have a suspicion that this conflict will spill over into NATO, that NATO gets some at some point in the not too distant future, sometime this year. I don't know to what extent it will, but that it probably will spill over in one way or another. Of course, there'll be hysterics in the media, in the Western media about it, and it'll blow it up more than it actually is. But I think it'll happen. And initially, I thought it was going to be most likely Poland, but I'm wondering now if it won't be either Estonia, Latvia, or Lithuania. Will there be some kind of an incursion across?
About half of two of those countries are Russian speakers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kind of tying back to what just took place in Pakistan. There was a vote at the Human Rights General Assembly this week to suspend Russia from the Human Rights Council.
Yeah.
Over allegations of committing horrific human rights violations in Ukraine. Serbia was one of the countries that voted. Now, that's a bad look for the Serbian leader who's just been re-elected.
And not popular with his people.
No.
Who are very pro-Russian.
Who are pro-Russia. He's saying, if you scroll down, Serbia was among the 92 countries which voted in favor of the resolution to suspend Russian membership of the Human Rights Council. But he's now stated that Serbia voted under, quote, the threat of facing sanctions and increasing pressures. I believe him.
Mm-hmm.
I believe him. I mean, we just look at what took place in Pakistan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people, for so long now, they've been going on about Russian interference in our elections. Like, it is daily business in the other direction.
No, yeah.
Like, daily business. There are so many things to interfere in on every day. They don't even all make the news.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's par for the course, right?
Unless
it's not
Bucha or Khan just go and actually announce to tell the world, we were forced to.
Mm-hmm. But it's all right when you're forced to do the right thing, Neil.
Democracy, baby, huh? Western democracy.
Talking about propaganda, Ukraine really doesn't know when to stop, you know, and I think that'll be part of their own doing. They've already, you know, red-pilled, if you want to call it that, a lot of people in terms of how they have overdone the propaganda, like using, you know, in certain situations, even in Bucha, for people who can see, and in Kramatorsk, and how they put up a video game. Footage of video games and stuff that really undermines
Arestovich using that photo that from a still of Patrick Lancaster's video of the woman he found with the swastika burned on her stomach.
Right, and saying that
a week later, Arestovich tweets it, look what these Russians did to our people in wherever.
So they're undermining people's trust in them as a reliable source of information, which is a good thing. But they don't seem to realize how they're shooting themselves in the foot in that respect. I just put up Ukraine.mp4. This is the latest missive, and I don't know who thought this was a good idea, but you can have a watch.
Ці свині століттями називали нас малоросами. Топтали наш прапор, насміхалися з нашої мови і творили кумедний образ українця з оселедцем, салом і галушками. Під п'яне гикання і звуки російської гармонії вони нас вбивали, морили голодом, розпинали по червоних катівнях і відправляли у вічну мерзлоту сибірських таборів. Вбивали доти, доки у миролюбній хліборобській нації не прокинулося щось страшне. Щось, що віками дрімало у надрах дніпровських круч. Первісний і прадавній український Бог. І тепер ми збираємо свої криваві жнива. Тепер на вас усіх чекає смерть. За Бучу, Ірпінь, Київ, Харків, Одесу, Маріуполь. Ви будете вбиті всі. Ваші трупи, як найгірше падло, лежатимуть в полях, лісосмугах і вздовж доріг. Їх роздиратимуть собаки і дикі тварини, а ваші матері чекатимуть вас в Твері, Пскові, Рязані. Але ви, сучі виродки, не повернетесь додому. Ніколи. Добро пожаловать в ад.
Yep.
Hence, denazification campaigns. Thanks, that's useful.
Yeah, it might appeal to some people, but other people are just going to go, dude, you people have a problem, you know what I mean? If you think that's good for putting out there as a, you know, widely publicized and it represents, it's going to get people to...
That being shared on Western social media. Is that where you found it?
It's on Ukraine. It's a message primarily to Ukrainians,
right,
spread around Ukraine, but it's obviously, once it gets there, then it's the Twitterati love it, you know, especially the ones that are all the numbskulls.
Pro Azov battalion for the duration of this campaign.
Who are just doing it, the ones who are just doing it for the fields, you know, who can't see beyond how they feel inside, and everything that everything outside of them must reflect how they feel inside. If their fields are feeling a certain direction, then that's what's true. That's how it should go, you know.
Something has definitely awoken in Ukraine, and it's evil.
It's always been there, or it has been there for a while.
But it's
has been awoken, yeah, by the US.
It's always been there, but it
has been weaponized by the US.
Yeah, and spread, and deepened. I don't know. There's so many. We're not going to show any today, I hope, but there are lots of horrific videos. We showed one that did get some traction in the West. That was Russian POWs, but there's torture videos of civilians and stuff. Other Russian POWs, they're inhuman. What's most interesting for me was a couple of days ago. The Russians, when they arrest, when they capture POWs, what they've been doing now here and there is showing them videos that are now circulating of the torture of Russians.
Yeah, and see what they think.
And I saw one where the guy he's like, I
can't
cannot watch
watch
this. That is not human.
Mm-hmm.
Correct, it is not human. So he got an awakening.
Yeah. The thing about it is that most Ukrainian military personnel are just average, manipulated.
Did it for the money.
Well,
or
did it for money, or did it for patriotic feelings? Especially people, Ukrainians from the West or whatever, and they were sold a line from the government about fighting for your country and all that kind of stuff, and they did it. And they're not bad people in that respect. But the problem is that there's a very clear distinction between those kinds of members of the Ukrainian military and the militants. Let's say the Azov and the Aidar battalion and other kind of right-wing neo-Nazi type battalions that are in control of the situation. They're the ones who faced down Zelensky in 2000 and just after he became president, actually in 2017. 19, sorry. He went down to try and get them to kind of to retreat from Donbass, and they went no, and they kind of stood up to him, and he tried to kind of shirt front them, as the Aussies say, and say, I'm the president of Ukraine, you think I'm a fool or whatever. But they didn't back down. They said, listen, you don't control the situation, and if you don't, we do what we want, and if you try to coerce us, there'll be problems for you. We're in control, and those people are the ones who are in control of. They're spread throughout the Ukrainian military, the average Ukrainian military membership, and they call the shots. They direct the course of it. Like that, one of them we said about Maidan, basically, that if it wasn't for the right sector and the right-wing neo-Nazi types in Maidan, that the US-backed coup, that the whole thing would have turned into a gay parade.
Yeah.
Nothing would have been achieved. There would have been no ousting of Yanukovych or anything. That the killings and the death of 100 people who were shot by snipers unknown, and the attacks and the killing of policemen in Kiev during that Maidan coup was all of that was orchestrated by those right-wing neo-Nazi elements who had a very definite plan, and they were fully supported by people like John McCain, Victoria Nuland, and the American government. And the plan, what's happening right now, was birthed then, basically, and there was a trajectory from then until now, leading up to this situation where Russia said, okay, enough is enough. So it's got a while to go, this conflict, just so everybody knows. It's going to continue on into the summer to one extent or another. How it's going to end, well, we've already said it's going to end with effective annexation of a significant part of Ukraine. Maybe not officially to Russia, but for all intents and purposes to Russia in terms of being compliant and being a part of Russia, if not in name. And the rest of Ukraine will be left to the EU if they want it. But you can bet your ass that at that moment, at that time, all of the outpouring of feelings and love and support for Ukraine from the EU will drop like a hot potato, and they'll walk away and say, "See you later, bye bye." And then only then will the Ukrainian people who've been labouring under that illusion will realize that it was an illusion, that these people they're not serious people at all in the European Parliament and in the European government and in the US government. They're being exploited, yeah. Unfortunately, it takes people a long time to figure that out. They need really hard, painful proof of that, and okay, so be it. There's no other way around it, Anyway.
Today's election day in France. Is Little Macaroni going to win?
Who knows?
Do we care?
Well, we won't find out today because it's the first one when all the usual suspects all throw their hat in the ring, 7 or 8 of them, whatever, and the vote is split up. Or
I think
more.
It's 15, but
whatever.
Yeah.
They all throw their hat in the ring, and the vote gets divvied up between them all, and then the top 2 are selected with the most votes, and they go head to head in a crunch match next Sunday.
Tete, as they say.
Tete, exactly. In a crunch match next Sunday to see who's going to be the winner. And most likely, unless there's a big upset, it's going to be Macron and Le Pen next Sunday going head to head. And who knows? We'll have to ask that question next Sunday based on the fields between now and then. What the market thinks. We'll find out what the market thinks between today and next Sunday, because the market will be deciding, because the sure shit won't be the people. No, and all the politicians, what the word's coming out from people.
Washington.
Movers and shakers, yeah.
Who's Victoria Nuland going to call between now and next Sunday?
Right.
That's yeah.
Who's she going to give a freedom cookie to? No, Victoria Nuland doesn't care about the EU, remember?
Oh, yeah.
Fuck the EU.
Fuck the EU.
Yeah, so we'll find out next Sunday, but this Sunday, today, the vote today isn't really that significant, as long as it follows the predicted outcome, which is Macron and Macron first, Le Pen second. Macron with 30%, Le Pen with 25, 21, Macron with 28, her with 21, something like that. And then the two and the rest behind. But we'll find out next Sunday. And will that be significant? I don't know. Will it have any bearing on things? Who knows? It depends if Le Pen, like many, presidential or prime ministerial hopefuls, say lots of nice things, lots of positive things, anti-current government things, differing policies, all that kind of stuff, in order to get elected. And then when they're elected, if she's elected, does she drop them all? Because she's saying good things that would make you want to see her as Prime Minister of France or President of France rather than Macron. Although Macron's not that bad, as far as it goes. But
really,
yeah. Well, I mean, relatively, Neil. Come on, look what we're dealing with here. You know what I mean? Look what we're doing in terms of the options. You know what I mean? Or in terms of what's going on around Europe and the US.
It could be worse. It could always be worse. I can't get over though, like that.
But if
his campaign manifesto, and they all had different. We saw them, brochures sent out everywhere. And Macron's first item was, "I'm going to impose a carbon tax, and it'll be pan-European."
Yeah, that's what he said. That's what
that
everybody
was
wants.
the thing that sparked the Yellow Vest rebellion.
He said it was worse than that. He said that he was going to do what French people wanted him to do, which was impose a carbon tax, and like you
To
could see
safeguard
that
their children's future.
Well, you could see that like the vast like the whole of the French nation turned around and went, "What? Excuse me? We want what? Carbon tax? No, you must be thinking of some other French population because that's no, thanks." But anyway, if Le Pen, she says out of NATO, France out of NATO, European Union restructured to be, which it really is, make it official what it is, a bunch of independent states who just cooperate with each other. No kind of European Union, and she's not going to upend that whole thing, obviously, but that's her policies. Those are the two main things, basically. And also, she's more favourable towards Russia. So we shall see. Although it's hard for any leader of any European country to be favourable to Russia in the current climate. So we'll see how she gets on if she wins. See how she gets on with that. But like I said, we'll find that out next Sunday. Not during this show, but we'll be able to give you a better reading on the situation next Sunday because that'll be the day the voting's happening. For now, just wait and see. And the same goes for the rest of it. Wait and see. Pay attention. Don't strain at gnats and swallow camels. Just stay cool, watch things as they progress, and keep watching us because we're keeping you right, keeping you on the straight and narrow, and we'll continue to do that with another show, like I said, next week. So for today, I think we're done. Thanks for watching, listening, and commenting. Don't forget to smash all the like buttons or do whatever you want to them, but push them in some way. And we'll be back next week on another show, like I said. So until then, have a good day and stay cool. Keep our country.
Thanks for watching. See you next week.
Can't stop the signal now.